Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG Show. The first topic for tonight, God bless Bill Barr. I'm reading from Breitbart here. Attorney General William Barr said Wednesday evening, other than slavery, which was a different kind of restraint, coronavirus lockdowns were the greatest intrusion on civil liberties in American history. Barr's comments came during a Constitution Day celebration at Hillsdale College, commemorating the date in 1789 when the Constitution was signed by the framers in Philadelphia. Throughout the coronavirus pandemic, Barr has expressed alarm at the restrictions imposed by state authorities on First Amendment rights, particularly the freedom of religion. In April, Barr's Department of Justice issued a memorandum to all U.S. attorneys to, quote, be on the lookout for state and local directives that could be violating the constitutional rights and civil liberties of individual citizens, unquote. He explained that while there might be reasonable and temporary restrictions on some First Amendment rights for the sake of public health, they should not become an overbearing infringement. The DOJ Civil Rights Division subsequently took a stand against state and local governments that were restricting religious services to an extreme extent. The division's interventions often prompted a relaxation of the rules. Earlier this week, a federal judge ruled that Pennsylvania's coronavirus lockdowns were unconstitutional. While the state's actions may have been undertaken with the good intention of addressing a public health emergency, Judge William Stickman IV ruled, even in an emergency, the authority of government is not unfettered. The liberties protected by the Constitution are not fair weather freedoms, in place when times are good, but able to be cast aside in times of trouble. Well, God bless Judge William Stickman IV. Barr's comments came in addition to prepared remarks in which he criticized DOJ prosecutors for abusing their power and defended the intervention of senior DOJ leadership in the decisions made by lower-level prosecutors. And more on that from the Washington Post. Barr issues blistering critique of his own Justice Department, insisting on his absolute authority to overrule career staff, whom he said too often injected themselves into politics and went headhunting for high-profile targets. Speaking at an event hosted by Hillsdale College, a school with deep ties to conservative politics, Barr directly addressed the criticism that has been building for months inside the department toward his heavy hand in politically sensitive cases, particularly those involving associates of President Donald Trump. What exactly am I interfering with, he asked. Under the law, all prosecutorial power is invested in the Attorney General. Barr's comments were remarkable in that the head of the Justice Department cataloged all of the ways in which he thought his agency had gone astray over the years and in its current formulation harms the body politic. Barr has drawn considerable criticism for intervening in criminal cases in ways that help benefit the president's friends. Barr said that it was he, not career officials, who have the ultimate authority to decide how cases should be handled, and derided less experienced, less senior bureaucrats, who current and former prosecutors have long insisted should be left to handle their cases free from interference from political employees. And he spoke out against headhunting, and let's see. The criminalization of politics is not healthy, Barr said. The criminal law is supposed to be reserved for the most egregious misconduct, conduct so bad that our society has decided it requires serious punishment, up to and including being locked away in a cage. These tools are not built to resolve political disputes, and it would be a decidedly bad development for us to go the way of third world nations, where new administrations routinely prosecute their predecessors for various ill-defined crimes against the state. The political winners ritually prosecuting the political losers is not the stuff of a mature democracy. Hear, hear. Needless to say, Barr's comparison of COVID-19 lockdowns with slavery drew hysterical response from social media and elsewhere. Representative James Clyburn of South Carolina, the number 3 House Democratic leader, told CNN that Barr's remarks were the most ridiculous, tone-deaf, god-awful things I've ever heard because they wrongly equated human bondage with a measure aimed at saving lives. Slavery was not about saving lives. It was about devaluing lives, said Clyburn, who is Black. You think so? I think I guessed that. This pandemic is a threat to human life. Well, there's all sorts of threats to human lives out there. So presumably if we acted on that principle, none of us would be allowed to do anything ever. Barr has previously said that some orders were disturbingly close to house arrest, and the Justice Department sent letters to several states warning that some of their virus-related restrictions might be unlawful. New Jersey Congressman Bill Pascrell Jr., reacting to the comments Wednesday, tweeted, "Bill Barr is drunk with power, an out-of-control fanatic, a frothing enemy of democracy. Barr should be impeached and then stripped of his law licenses for life." Wow. Bill Pascrell Jr. Is not a Black man. He is, in fact, a white man. And I guess this is the Trump derangement syndrome has now seemed to have infected tens of millions of people in the United States and, of course, elsewhere. And if you go to Bill Pascrell Jr.'s Twitter page, you find a picture of him marching at the head of of course, a Black Lives Matter protest. And in his picture, he is wearing sunglasses and an American flag mask. Now, I suppose that Representative Pascrell has not heard of the United States Flag Code, which is a federal law. Let's see. The flag should never be used as wearing apparel, bedding, or drapery. It should never be festooned, drawn back, nor up in folds, but always allowed to fall free. Yes. I had not heard of this fellow Pascrell before, but he seems close to being an actual lunatic. Let's see. Hello, Professor Paul. MCT says, Happy Constitution Day. Yes, Happy Constitution Day to all. Speaking of the Constitution and its Bill of Rights, according to Mediaite, a group of anti-maskers, many in MAGA apparel, invaded a Target in Florida this week, demanding that shoppers remove their masks while yelling, "We're not going to take it anymore." The video went viral on Twitter after first showing up on Reddit. The group blasted the Twisted Sister song, "We're Not Going to Take It," to drive the point home. And this did not sit well with Dee Snider, the singer of Twisted Sister. If you remember that band, they were popular for a few years. After We're Not Going to Take It, there was a whole host of videos, basically, that the spirit of rock and roll meant that authority figures should be resisted. Yes, we are not going to bow down to you. But here is Dee Snider today. No, these selfish assholes do not have my permission or blessing to use my song for their moronic cause, #CutTheShit. Because as we know, the spirit of rock and roll has always been about meek submission to overweening authority. These rebels, yeah, were they ever really rebellious? And I don't really think so. I think it was just a pose for money. I'm reminded in this regard of that song by a Cake, Rock and Roll Lifestyle. Excess ain't rebellion. You're drinking what they're selling. Your self-destruction doesn't hurt them. Your chaos won't convert them. They're so happy to rebuild it, you never really kill it. Back to Florida. Take your masks off, one protester yelled, while another added, yeah, take it off. Woo, yes, take it off, another protester yelled, while excitedly jumping up and down. Look at these kids. Let them be an example, added another who was gesturing towards a group of maskless children. Take it off. Look at the kids. Anti-mask protests have been popping up throughout the United States, despite the shocking number of coronavirus cases and deaths per day, especially in Florida, home to this particular demonstration. Apparently, Mediaite is not going to tell us what is really important here, that so-called case numbers are rocketing, but the number of deaths has pretty much fallen down to zero. Dr. Robert Redfield, the director of the Centers for Disease Control and a member of the White House Coronavirus Task Force, also testified to the Senate on Wednesday that face masks are more guaranteed to protect the public than a vaccine. I was talking about this yesterday. What is he telling us? He's telling us that these vaccines aren't going to be very good. Whether they will be mandated by law in certain American and other jurisdictions, well, we don't know so, but I'm tending to think yes. The vaccines are rubbish, but you're going to be forced to take them anyway. And by the way, masks are now permanent because, as you know, we're heading into cold and flu season, and one can never be too careful. I mean, we're talking about a matter of life and death here. We're also talking about a matter which has been quite profitable to some people, not the non-essential people, as they were called, or still called, whose businesses have been shut down, and many of which will be shut forever. We're talking about the important people. We're talking about the 1%. From Business Insider, the richest people in the United States have become $845 billion wealthier during the first 6 months of the pandemic, with the likes of Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Warren Buffett all registering big increases. The Institute for Policy Studies, a left-leaning think tank, and Americans for Tax Fairness said the total net worth of 643 of the nation's richest people rose from $2.95 trillion to $3.8 trillion between March 18th and September 15th. The calculations are based on data using Forbes' annual Billionaires report and real-time Forbes data. That marks a 29% increase from the rough date at which coronavirus lockdown started and financial markets went into free fall. The stock market has since recovered, with the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ hitting record highs, but COVID-19 has killed nearly 200,000 Americans, and the economy is still mired in recession because of the sheer, blind, mindless panic of politicians. Chuck Collins, director of the Institute for Policy Studies program on inequality, said, "The difference is stark between profits for billionaires and the widespread economic misery in our nation. Clearly, the priorities of our elected officials in Washington, D.C. are completely upside down." Bezos, the chief executive of leading online retailer Amazon, has undoubtedly been the biggest beneficiary of the pandemic. His wealth rose by 73.2 billion to 113 billion. Amazon shares have gained 40% this year as the company racked up billions in online orders for anything from groceries to exercise bikes from consumers who were confined to their homes. Musk, the founder and CEO of electric vehicle maker Tesla, is a close second. His wealth has ballooned by 67.4 billion, or 274%. Yeah, it's tough all over, but not for some. And we see a similar thing in Canada. This is from Ricochet. The top 20 richest billionaires in Canada have amassed 37 billion in collective wealth increases since March, when COVID-related lockdowns and closures began across Canada, according to a new report from the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. This revelation about the scale of wealth gains for the country's most affluent over the past 6 months comes on the heels of new polling this week that shows 76% support for a wealth tax in Canada. A wealth tax consistently polls as among the most popular public policy proposal in Canada, with majority support from backers of every political party. Fundamentally, this is about the power of a wealthy few, such as Galen Weston's Loblaws, to claw back the pandemic pay of frontline workers to increase their profits, said the researcher and report co-author Alex Hemingway, and their power under current policies to amass huge portions of wealth that is actually created by all of us. So here's a story from National Review. Officials in Nashville, Tennessee, concealed from the media how few coronavirus cases had been traced to bars and restaurants in the city, according to emails sent between the mayor's office and the city's health department. Emails obtained by Fox 17 News appear to show that the two offices seemingly conspired to conceal data showing that while construction and nursing homes led to more than 1,000 cases each as of June 30th, only 22 cases had been traced to bars and restaurants. In a discussion of the numbers, Leslie Waller from the health department asked, "This isn't going to be publicly released, right? Just info for the mayor's office?" "Correct. Not for public consumption," replied senior advisor Benjamin Eagles. The next month, in response to rumors that only 80 cases had been traced to bars and restaurants, a Tennessean reporter asked, "The figure you gave of more than 80 does lead to a natural question. If there have been over 20,000 positive cases of COVID-19 in Davidson and only 80 are traced to restaurants and bars, doesn't that mean restaurants and bars aren't a very big problem?" Health Department official Brian Todd asked 5 health department officials for assistance in responding to the reporter. "Please advise how you recommend I respond." And as I mentioned yesterday, it is a very strange situation that we're in where latrine wallahs are calling the shots about what people may or may not do. An unnamed sender responded, "My 2 cents. We have certainly refused to give counts per bar because those numbers are low per site. We could still release the total, though, and then a response to the over 80 could be because that number is increasing all the time, and we don't want to say a specific number." A city staff attorney at the instruction of council member Steve Glover was able to verify that the emails are real. Glover accused the city of covering up the data and fabricating information. The councilman said many bartenders, waitresses, and restaurant owners from downtown Nashville have reached out asking why officials wouldn't release those numbers. "We raised taxes 34% and put hundreds, literally thousands of people out of work that are now worried about losing their homes, their apartments, and we did it on bogus data that should be illegal." Well, we know something about COVID-19, which is that you get it from typically repeated contact with someone who is infected, not random contacts. Which means, of course, that these masks are useless. But no, we've got to keep the panic going. The panic is, well, I suppose that it is the panic that all the politicians are living for now. The government of New Zealand has revealed, or it's been revealed about the government of New Zealand, that the GDP has suffered a huge crash. And why is that? Because of the draconian lockdowns in New Zealand. So how bad is COVID-19 in New Zealand? Which I will remind you are 2 rather small islands situated in the middle of nowhere. Case numbers. There are 7 new cases of COVID-19 today. September 17th. There are now 77 active cases of COVID-19 in New Zealand. 77. Why, that is a shocking number. And that certainly justifies a lockdown, doesn't it? Doesn't it? And let's see. Oh, there have been 25 deaths in New Zealand. And how many people live in New Zealand? Let's see here. Okay, 5 million people and 77 deaths. Well, if governments can strip people's most basic civil liberties from them based on that 25 deaths in a population of 5 million, I guess there is no limit to their power. And as I've said before, with regard to what is going on in the world in response, the blind panic and draconian shutdowns, speak now or forever hold your peace. Because if the governments get away with this, well, they will be emboldened. won't they? They will find any excuse for stripping away our rights to movement, our rights to where we eat and drink, where we walk, what we say. This is from Summit News. A remarkable video out of Australia shows people chanting freedom as a food market is forcefully shut down by COVID riot cops. The clip shows dozens of police on horseback and armed with riot gear facing against market sellers and customers. Chants of freedom, freedom then break out as one officer directs the riot police to move in. Cops armed with shields then begin charging and pushing people away while one man is singled out and dragged by officers. The state of Victoria has enforced one of the most draconian coronavirus lockdowns in the developed world, with authorities giving themselves the power to enter homes without a warrant and also to seize people's children. As we highlighted earlier this week, a pregnant woman was arrested in her home in front of her own kids for the crime of posting about the protest on Facebook. Police in Melbourne also announced that they would be using surveillance drones to catch people who don't wear masks and to keep track of cars that travel further than 5 kilometers from home. Journalist Avi Yamini was also dragged to the ground and arrested for merely covering an anti-lockdown protest in Melbourne. Numerous videos have also emerged of people being forcibly arrested by police for not wearing masks. So let's go to Will Jones at Lockdown Skeptics. Students at a Cambridge college have received a coronavirus community statement that they must sign and adhere to, or risk being ejected from college accommodation. Lockdown Skeptics has seen the draconian rules issued by Trinity College to its students, and it's a shocker. It states you are required to sign this statement and adhere to it if you would like to return to or remain resident in college accommodation. No accommodation for the new academic year will be allocated until you return a signed copy of this statement. The senior tutor and junior bursar can withdraw your accommodation if you breach your commitment to follow the community statement. The rules, community guidelines, include being prepared to move rooms or leave at very short notice, rigorous cleaning duties, no visitors, being limited to the bare minimum of possessions for basic living standards, and a requirement to store in your room 3 days' supply of non-perishable food for use in the event of a lockdown. Parties are likely to be deemed a grave breach. It is left entirely up to academic supervisors whether they will teach their students in person, leaving many at risk of a substandard education. As one university lecturer told us, I've been at the receiving end of online teaching, and it is absolutely not as good as the real thing. Even in a small group, you lose the immediacy, your attention drifts, and your tutor loses the body language necessary to get a feel of how you were responding to the instruction. Of course, anyone who has, tried to read a book, reads books on the computer screen, or say watches movies, finds their attention drifting. What else is happening? I have to check what else is happening. Maybe the moon blew up while I was spending 10 minutes reading this book. So I got to get back, see what's going on in social media. No, and it's, if you're going to drift off on Zoom, well, it's not like being in a classroom, is it? Where the professor can see how much attention he or she is getting from the students, and perhaps, change the nature of the presentation or present more energy or as such like. New students were told before term began that they cannot defer their place if this is not to their liking. It's our way or the highway at Trinity College, Cambridge, the college which, over the course of its history, has won more Nobel Prizes than France and Belgium combined, has turned into a citadel of unscientific, hysterical groupthink. Perhaps it's because their new master is Sally Davis, the former chief medical officer, or, as I like to say, latrine walla. Treating young people in this way is cruel. Dressing it up as a community statement, which represents a commitment by students, a commitment they had no choice about whether to make, is Orwellian doublespeak. If they don't make this supposedly voluntary commitment, they lose their place at Cambridge. Another headline here, Boris needs to look again at the facts about COVID. in an article in The Spectator. To get the truth of what is happening and work out the approach we need to take, we need a control, something to show what happens when things are done differently. Peru offers one possible example. It has one of the world's strictest lockdowns, yet also the world's highest official death toll at a rate of 929 per million. We also have Sweden, which favored a light touch approach. There has been no new big rise in cases or deaths, and the country's economy is getting back on its feet. Critics point out that Sweden fared significantly worse than its Nordic neighbors, with 578 deaths per million, compared to Denmark's 109 and Finland's 61. However, Sweden, which never took on the burden of indefinite suppression, is now in a much stronger position to contemplate a return to normal life. What's more, an international comparison in The Lancet in July offered little conclusive evidence connecting the timing and strictness of lockdown in a country and the COVID-19 death rate. Yet still, our leaders insist that wide-ranging restrictions on social and economic life are the best way to respond to this threat. The public can be forgiven for overestimating the severity of the virus, having been subjected to a barrage of terror for the past 6 months. But the government and its advisors have no excuse. They ought to have twigged by now that for most people, the threat has been over-egged and the response to it far out of proportion to the danger it poses. Being able to step back and reappraise evidence and change direction in light of that, and then crucially bringing the public along with you, is an essential characteristic of a good leader, and one that we are in desperate need of right now. On this count, Boris Johnson is failing badly. It's a wartime situation. It's an exceptional situation, as Carl Schmitt would say. And in such situations, the modern rule has been to criticize the government in a time of war or pseudo-war is akin to treason. And I'm looking at this hideous poster from the National Health Service: stay home, protect the NHS, save lives. Coronavirus, anyone can get it. Anyone can spread it. If you go out, you can spread it. People will die. Protect the NHS. As has been pointed out by others, the purpose of the National Health Service is to protect Britons. It is not the purpose of Britons to protect the NHS, but you see how this is all turned around. Like the neoliberals, the globalists, argue quite seriously that it is the duty of people to serve the economy rather than the duty of the economy to serve the people. Tom Hodgkinson, the editor of The Idler, wrote, "From needing to protect our NHS, which is actually Big Brother's NHS, for being overwhelmed, we went to needing to protect ourselves against a new surge of infections brought in from other countries, ruining summer halls for many. And now as testing becomes more widespread, more cases are used to scare us, which are not cases at all, but positive results in healthy people with PCR testing. This finds a genetic needle in a haystack, quite possibly a signal from a previous infection with another of the 100 or so coronaviruses out there. And they have spent billions on lockdowns of proven uselessness and millions on buying up a vaccine that doesn't yet exist. And yet papers like The Mirror, Guardian, Independent, etc. are baying for still more interference, including Stalin-esque snitching on neighbors who break the entirely non-evidence-based instructions." Wow. National debt over £2 trillion. Is this ever going to be paid back? As I've said many times before, I just think, no, this money's never going to be paid back. I don't know, it's going to be defaulted, or inflation is going to run wild. There are no other possibilities here. I'm looking at a picture here of Sir Keir, what's his name? Keir Starmer, who is the Labour leader, the opposition leader, and his female deputy leader. And they're pictured kneeling on a carpet in a room, I guess in order to demonstrate their solidarity over something that happened in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Yeah, it's everything that the world is talking about In my own country, Canada, Doug Ford, who is the conservative premier of Ontario and who was being assailed as a fascist before he was elected, has turned out to be, let's say, the most hysterical premier in Canada. Well, Quebec is a rival, I suppose. This from the CBC. Ontario rolls back gathering limits in some areas as 293 new COVID-19 cases reported. And there's a picture of Doug Ford with a mask on, and he's touching the mask like this. You're not supposed to do that, are you? Premier Ford said that starting Friday in Toronto, Ottawa, and Peel region, gatherings are now limited to 25 people outdoors and 10 indoors. Those new caps don't extend to places such as restaurants, movie theaters, banquet halls, gyms, or convention centers. Why? Why not? So apparently being outdoors is more dangerous than being in a restaurant, movie theater, banquet hall, gym, or convention center. This is just, it's sheer nonsense. Doing something because something must be done. Ford said the new gathering limits don't apply to those areas or schools because those places have really strict protocols in place. We're comparing apples and oranges here, Ford said. Instead, the new measures are meant to discourage things like parties. Yes, people getting together with friends or meeting new people, having fun. Apparently, this is the worst thing in the world. Toronto Mayor John Tory, who is a certified imbecile, said Thursday he supports the province's rollbacks for the area, but also says it's a real concern that the new measures don't apply to places such as banquet halls. Dr. David Williams, chief latrine walla for Ontario, said at a news conference that the province has seen workplace infections as well as cases in bars and restaurants, but he also noted that the majority of those cases were staff-to-staff transmission. Again, the more time that you spend with someone who is infected, the more likely you are to be infected yourself. I mean, how stupid do you have to be in order not to understand this? Oh, and let's have another bash at partygoers. People at any gathering must also maintain distancing measures with people outside their social bubble, Ford said. You remember the days before we knew what a social bubble was? Actually, I'm not sure that I know what it is. Is there a government registry of people within your social bubble? This is to send a message to the reckless, careless people who want to hold these parties, Ford said. The premier said the province is also instituting a minimum fine of $10,000 for the organizers of illegal social gatherings, as well as a $750 fine for people who show up to them. We will throw the book at you if you break the rules. They must be a few fries short of a happy meal, these people. I don't think that Doug Ford and other politicians in North America quite understand the depth of the hatred that they are generating. I really don't think they understand this. Oh, well, the polls show that the majority of Canadians would agree with being locked in closets for, I don't know, indefinitely. Yeah, and how strongly do they believe this? You know, it's the 20% of the 20%, the Pareto principle, that makes the difference. And if 4% of people have a, let's say, strong, overwhelmingly against this, that is going to make the difference. Oh, yes. Oh, is there anything that COVID-19 can't do? Apparently, it's all tied up with the extremists, right-wing extremists and white supremacists. This is from the CBC, of course. Quebec extremists radicalized by COVID-19 conspiracy theories could turn to violence, experts warn. Quebec police have made several arrests after threats inspired by anti-government COVID-19 conspiracies. Apparently, the Premier of Quebec, Francois Legault, was threatened. Of course, all politicians, regardless of their policies, receive threats and death threats. The calls were traced to a 47-year-old trucker from Quebec City, Philippe Cote. A tracking device on his truck indicated Cote was in Texas, not far from a gun shop, when he phoned Legault's office. So what are these conspiracy? Yes, several bits of paper were found on which were written different political conspiracy theories. Reads a description of the incident contained in court documents. What are these conspiracy theories? Apparently, Cote was mixed up. He wanted answers, and he went on conspiracy websites. The suspects all have Facebook accounts that promote conspiracy theories about COVID-19, including some that originate from QAnon, a conspiracy movement that began in the US and is now considered a national security threat by the FBI. Doesn't the FBI have more serious things to worry about, particularly these days? Experts who monitor extremist groups in Quebec are concerned about the role conspiracy theories are playing in radicalizing online behavior and the possibility it could turn into real-world violence. We've seen it before, and it was called Alexandre Bissonnette, said Martin Geoffroy, who heads an anti-radicalization research center at Cégep Édouard Montpetit, a public francophone college. Alexandre Bissonnette was a man who went into a mosque in Quebec and killed, I believe, 12 or 13 people. So what are they worried about? That people who are entertaining conspiracy theories about COVID-19 are going to start massacring Muslims? Conspiracy theories shape the way a significant number of Quebecers think about the pandemic. A poll conducted last month for Montreal's La Presse newspaper suggested 35% of the population believe mainstream media outlets are spreading false information about COVID-19. 18% believe the pandemic is a tool created by governments to control them. Those findings echo a survey done in June by the province's Public Health Research Institute, which found 23% of Quebecers believe that COVID-19 was fabricated in a laboratory, a theory rejected by scientists who had studied the genetic code of the virus and determined it was not manipulated. That's not what I have read. Among the most popular purveyors of conspiracy theories in the province is Alexis Cossette-Trudel, the son of two convicted FLQ terrorists who broadcast his views on social media under the moniker Radio Québec. His YouTube channel has more than 110,000 subscribers. Analytics show that number has nearly quadrupled since the pandemic hit Quebec in March. Cossette-Trudel openly expresses support for QAnon, which holds, among other claims, that U.S. President Donald Trump is waging a battle against an international cabal of high-profile liberals who are Satan-worshipping pedophiles operating a child sex trafficking ring. In one recent video, Cossette-Trudel said Legault was exaggerating the risks of COVID-19 as part of a global plot to ruin the economy and prevent Trump from being elected. Doesn't seem all that unreasonable to me. Yes, the global economy gets wrecked, but as previously noted, the richest keep getting richer, fantastically richer. And Jeff Bezos, he has no material interest in COVID-19 panic. No, simply because people who are forbidden to go out will have to resort to buying their stuff from Amazon, but that's surely a coincidence. At a protest last Saturday in Montreal, which attracted several thousand people, there were dozens of posters and t-shirts inspired by QAnon symbols and slogans. Many participants said they thought the pandemic was over or fake, and that the government was lying about the deadliness of the disease. At first, I thought Radio Québec was too extreme, but then with time, I realized they are right, said Marie-Josée Bernard, a mother of three who took part in Saturday's demonstrations. Yes, governments have been lying to us for a long, long time about many, many things. I gave a list on Twitter. MK Ultra. Oh, that's an insane conspiracy theory. Actually, it's true. Operation Mockingbird, the CIA, and the Washington Post, absolutely true. Oh, the idea that the American and British governments would lie about Saddam Hussein in order to get a war. Oh, guess what? They did. I mean, I could go on, but no, conspiracy theories. I mean, conspiracies exist. But no, if you believe that, apparently that makes you a wicked, wicked person. And of course, the CIA is cheerleading. The CIA, the CBC. They're cheerleading for this, which has nothing to do with the fact that, of course, they are paid for by the government through taxpayer funds. Let's look at Alex Berenson here. Eliza Shapiro had tweeted, breaking, New York City schools will not physically reopen for all students on Monday. The city is doing a phased-in reopening instead by grade levels throughout the next few weeks. This is the second time the mayor has delayed in-person classes. Berenson comments, wow, with the help of the We Love Kids union, Bill de Blasio has managed to screw up New York City schools even more than the rest of the big city educrats. This is quite an achievement, and your Department of Pandemia will no doubt take notice. Scott Gottlieb, MD, tweeted, in New York City, indoor dining will resume before in-class learning for kids. We need to prioritize what's important societally and make sure we advance those goals. Safely returning kids to in-class learning in low-prevalence settings like New York City should be amongst our highest priority. Well, if it's New York City is a low prevalence setting, why these rules? Why all these rules? Why the lockdown? Berenson comments, if restaurants were taxpayer funded, they'd be closed forever too. I realize money makes no difference to Dr. Gottlieb, which is why taking hundreds of thousands of dollars a year from Pfizer doesn't affect his integrity, but the rest of us respond to economic incentives. And finally, oh no, Eugene Ju, MD, yes. To achieve a herd immunity of 60%, about 200 million Americans need to catch the coronavirus, and 3 million Americans need to die. Herd mentality is believing this all needs to happen because it's too hard to wear a mask, stay 6 feet away from others, and listen to scientists. Why is it 6 feet in the United States and 2 meters in Canada, say? Because 2 meters is not the same as 6 feet, because there are 39.37 inches in a meter. So that brings it up pretty much to 79 inches, which is 6 feet 7 inches. Did scientists, did experts come up with this? Of course, you see this kind of nonsense all the time in Canada, where you see signs saying that smoking is prohibited up to 7 meters from this instance. It's 7 meters? How long is 7 meters? See, what they did is they started with 20 feet and they attempted to change this into meters, resulting in that ungainly figure. The math is weak with this one, says Alex Berenson. Attention citizens, your Department of Pandemia warns you against herd immunity. You know what we do with cattle? We slaughter them. 100% death rate. Why would you want that, dummies? Stick to being sheep. Everyone loves sheep and nothing bad ever happens to them. Attention citizens. Okay, let's go back to the chat here. I had that album. What, the Cake album? I like Cake. Catchy songs, intelligent words. Jim Smith says, Jefferson Airplane, got a revolution, got a revolution. I've thought for some time, that a lot of these left-wing songs could be repurposed for right-wing usage. I'm thinking, first one that comes to mind is Thunderclap Newman's great song from 1969, Something in the Air. Chad Chudson, our valiant moderator, says hello, Kevin and chat, and hello to you, Chad. Ironically, again, Jim Smith, it was the Beatles who wrote the most sober song about the 60s revolutionary spirit in the song Revolution. Yes, sadly, John Lennon later regretted writing that song. Walrus Libertarian says the pandemic will never end. Masks are permanent. Yes. As I said, if you don't want that future, speak now or forever hold your peace. Justin Proto says, when do germophobes become an officially protected victim class? You have to come up with a different name for them. in the same way that people who are on the spectrum or just plain crazy are now referred to as neurodivergent. Chokokin666 says the public gets what the public wants, going underground. Again, if you look at the American Revolution, only 20% of the colonists supported secession from the British Empire, and only 20% of that 20% were willing to take up arms. David Wright says, power went out 5 seconds at the grocery store. Lady gasps and fretted, then looked to me for reassurance, sad. Jonathan Paul, rock has always been controlled opposition. Rage Against the Machine is the most extreme example of a poseur establishment front. I haven't checked out what Zach De La Rocha has had to say about mandatory masks, but I got a pretty good feeling he's in favor of them. Yo Mama says, realizing over the past few days how much mainstream decline rock has seen in recent years really got me down. I'm going to be talking about rock music, in particular Steely Dan, in a little while, and the idea that a band like Steely Dan could today become, huge. Well, it's unthinkable, isn't it? It's absolutely unthinkable. Dawn from Beyond says, I feel sad, angry, and frustrated how most young white people seem to love rap music. I just wonder about, intelligence there. I wonder about that. I don't know that it's all young white people. William Hicks says, the Fed's suppression of interest rates since 2009 has destroyed price discovery. Time value of money no longer exists. The economists have decided to assume that we are immortal. This is absolutely true, and it is critically important. Do you remember, if you ever studied economics or read a book about the virtues of the free market, you were instructed that capitalism was superior to socialism or communism because of price discovery. And now price discovery, it's surplus to requirements. Why are all these stocks doing so well? Is it because their revenues, their profits are up? Or is it because they're buying their own shares? Jim Kunstler has pointed out that the major problem with healthcare in the United States is the lack of a cash nexus, because the assumption is that someone else is going to be paying for it. And if someone else is going to be paying for it, then hospitals can charge whatever they like. I mean, it's a strange kind of bill. It's like university education. Oh, $60,000, I can't possibly afford this. Well, let's dicker about this. What can you afford? I mean, when you go to the store and you spend $3.99 for a frozen dinner, you don't go up to the front and say, $3.99, I can't afford that. Why don't you make it a little more reasonable? No. So yes, price discovery has disappeared. William Hicks says, even Keynes admitted in the long run we're all dead. Apparently the Fed no longer believes that's true. Eric von Kuhnelt-Ledin pointed out that Keynes was homosexual. So yes, it all ended for him with death because he had no progeny. Yes, John S. makes that very point. Keynes had no care, had no grandchildren, no skin in the game. Remember the 1973 film Cops and Robbers starring Cliff Gorman and Joe Bologna? Was wondering if you've seen it. No, I have not seen it. I'm assuming it's a comedy. I think the complaint is that a man with little reason to care about the ultimate fate of his nation should not have been listened to in the first place, John S. Actually, Keynes was very sound on the Versailles Treaty. KMG reads Tom Hodgkinson. Cool, says Jay Smith. Rock poses as revolution, but it's always been part of the elitist mop-up operation subduing the remaining Christian enemies, says Dan Allison. Airplane got a revolution, millions of dollars for RCA. That reminds me of something as well, that Columbia Records, which was, I suppose, considered the gold standard amongst record companies in the United States for many, many years, they missed out on the whole rock business. I mean, they had Bob Dylan, who didn't sell very many records until about 1965, and he was mocked as Hammond's Folly for years because John Hammond had insisted on signing him. But they missed out on the rock acts. But then they got into it at Woodstock, signed up all of these people, and they took out an infamous full-page ad in Rolling Stone magazine, which said, "The man can't bust our music." The man? You're owned by CBS. You are the man. Buddy says, Kevin, you got to admit those early 80s Expos teams were fierce, but they could never seal the deal. Yeah, it's true. Yako Raipala says, I've struggled with germophobia. Strangely, it seems to have made me immune to COVID hysteria. I've spent a lot of time telling myself that I don't need to wash hands every time I've touched something. Earlier this year, when I was living in the crazy house, I got to a point where I was pretty much washing my hands about every 15 minutes because I knew that my crazy landlady would, I don't know, start shrieking or whatever if she didn't hear the faucet in the bathroom running. I have managed to lower the number of times I wash my hands every day. Oh, I don't know, to about 8 or 10. Let's see, Yakarapala again. Now it seems that everyone is going through the same stuff that I went through ever since my dad bought me a microscope when I was a kid. And I found out that everything is full of little life forms. Yes, I was thinking about that. These people who partake in the COVID panic, who burst into, I don't know, tears or rage when they find out about people not wearing masks, don't let these people know about microscopes. No, don't let them know about microscopes because they will go completely over the edge. You may have heard that natalism, which means sponsoring the birth of children, is a very bad thing. And apparently it has something to do with Nazism or fascism or the like. But this story has got a lot of interest. This particular account is from The Blaze. The mayor of San Francisco, who rejoices in the moniker London Breed, wants to help pregnant women with the financial burden of having and caring for an infant, but only certain pregnant women. White, Asian, and Hispanic expectant mothers need not concern themselves with applying for help with the city's new program. It's only for Black and Pacific Islander women. Mayor Breed announced the city's new Abundant Birth Project on Monday. The Miami Herald reported the public-private partnership will give $1,000 per month during a woman's pregnancy and for the first 6 months after the baby is born. But the city is limiting the monies to only 150 Black and Pacific Islander women who, the city said, have been on the wrong side of a long-standing racial gap in birthing outcomes, which of course has nothing to do with freely chosen lifestyles. The mayor said hopes that so-called basic income supplement will be much bigger in the long term for the women who are able to secure it. She does not want them limited to just 6 months of post-birth help. The mayor has much more in kind, 2 years of giving money to a group of moms selected by race. Breed declared the program had a goal of eventually providing a supplement for up to 2 years post-pregnancy. Yes, eugenics, bad. Dysgenics, good. I think that's the lesson that we can take. And now I'm going to do a few stories about, well, I don't know, idiocy. Idiocy related to Black Lives Matter. From Summit News, Paul Joseph Watson. Video, Black woman refuses to let flight attendant pass her on plane because of white privilege. The clip begins with the flight attendant attempting to get past the Black woman as the obnoxious passenger repeatedly expresses her demand to go to the bathroom before accusing the attendant of getting aggressive with me. Another female passenger then gets involved in the argument as the Black woman gets in her face and tells her, "Are you my boss? You are a white privilege. You are not my boss. Sit down." She is already sitting down. The black woman then accuses the flight attendant of exercising her white privilege while still blocking her way. The encounter is made all the more stupid by the fact that the black woman could at any time just turn around and enter the bathroom, but she is intent on being insufferable and having an argument. "I need to get to my door," repeats the flight attendant as the black woman continues to bicker. "You have white privilege and it's not here. It's over with. It's 2020. Wake up. I'm a queen, California. She was from a black queen. Not we was kings, but we was queens," says the woman before again arguing with the other passenger and accusing her of having white privilege and telling her to shut up. "You need to understand you don't run America no more, sweetheart," she tells the blonde white woman before explaining how she once slapped the shit out of a white bitch for disrespecting her. Despite the fact that the black woman is not wearing a mask and she is clearly acting aggressively and impeding flight staff, she was not removed from the plane. That could be referred to as black privilege. Again, from Paul Joseph Watson, a video clip shows a grandmother confronting a teacher over the phone about how she told a student she didn't have a right to an opinion because she was white and blonde. The footage starts with the grandmother explaining to the teacher that her granddaughter is crying and hasn't been to school because of this BLM crap. She then accuses the teacher of telling her granddaughter that she had no right to express an opinion because she's British, white, and has blonde hair. After being told there is an audio recording of the exchange, the teacher responds, "Well, I can't remember. Maybe." The teacher then accuses the granddaughter, Kelsey, of having white privilege and saying that she didn't live through what the other girl involved in the discussion, who was evidently black, had experienced. Oh dear, oh dear. The granddaughter accuses the teacher of being racist as the call ends. Had this teacher told a black student her opinion doesn't matter because she's black, she'd be fired from her job, face hate crime charges, and the story would be international news. So, what do the celebrities think about this? Well, Janelle Monae, I believe that's the pronunciation of her name, but I stand to be corrected. She stepped onto the black carpet at the premiere of Antebellum on Monday night in Los Angeles in an Eli Saab gown, XIV, I guess that'd be 14 carats jewels, Christian Louboutin heels, a clutch from Carolina Santo Domingo, and a custom-made N95 face mask by Aliona Kononova. This is in Variety. Do they get paid for mentioning these designers? It's so weird, but you know what? I'm rolling with it. Monae, who stars in the horror thriller as a successful author who finds herself seemingly transported back in time to the Civil War as a slave, told Variety. "Safety first, but I also just really needed a reason to get dressed up. I feel like I'm the most overdressed person, but that's because I haven't been out in so long." Celebrations aside, Monae said the film carries a powerful message. It reminds us that the past is not the past. Whoa, head blown. The past is not even dead, and I think the film is very timely and does a great job, an exceptional job of linking and connecting the dots of the past, the present, and what could be our future. I'm very honored to stand here and represent for Black women who have been dismantling white supremacy and systemic racism for centuries. Yeah, okay. Does she really believe that? How long does she think that a century is? Was Days of Our Lives star Melissa Reeves fired for liking anti-BLM tweets? Oh dear, you get fired for that now? The controversy can be traced back to June when right-wing commentator Candace Owens made a statement questioning what happens to funds that are donated to Black Lives Matter. According to its website, Black Lives Matter Inc. is not a charity, she wrote on Twitter. Can anyone tell me where the hundreds of millions BLM has raised goes? Owens shared her statements on Instagram as well, which is where Melissa apparently came across them. Screenshots shared by Twitter user MG Mendacious appeared to show that Melissa liked the posts questioning the validity of the Black Lives Matter movement using her verified account. It probably won't surprise anyone to learn that those likes caused quite the stir online. And MG Mendacious responded, "I am absolutely disgusted and sick right now. and I'm no longer in any denial about how Missy Reeves feels. Take a look at a couple of disgusting and racist Instagram posts she liked. Yes, Days of Our Lives fans quickly started weighing in on Melissa's actions, with some calling her to be fired from the show. So maybe it's time for NBC Days to fire Melissa Reeves again. You replaced her once, you can do it again. Just find someone who's not a racist. We tolerated Melissa for years. Enough is enough. Oh, and I guess I'll give the final word to Lindsay Godfrey. She was responding to Donna Weish-Absher, who said, "We all have our opinions and views. That's what makes the USA the land of the free and home of the brave." And she was slammed down with, there is no difference in opinion on racism, homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia. Lindsay Godfrey is the ambassador for INERA, which supposedly provides access to life-saving and life-altering medical assistance to refugee children impacted by war. So apparently the United States has to accept the whole world. That's what I'm getting from that. Oh, yes. Kamala Harris, foot model. Twitter was in a tizzy today because of Kamala Harris's footgear. Sarah Galvez tweets, well, this was a couple of days ago, Kamala like Megan the Stallion, in Timberland boots. I repeat, our next vice president in Tim's. A very casual look being rocked by Kamala Harris here as she comes out of an aircraft. It just struck me the difference in men and women. You could make a binary decision, based on how men and women would respond to this picture. Men look at this little video, this GIF, and they think this is not a serious person. Women look at this GIF and they think, where did you get that jacket? How much does it cost? Yes. Oh, according to Yahoo Light, Melania Trump gets mocked for wearing Timberland boots while visiting the troops. This was in December of 2018. Breaking news here. There's no feeling like finishing a book, and I'm proud of this one. In A Promised Land, I try to provide an honest accounting of my presidency, the forces we grapple with as a nation, and how we can heal our divisions and make democracy work for everybody. This is Barack Obama. His new book is coming out November 17th, 2020, which is 2 weeks after Election Day. Do you think that Obama is going to be disappointed, hurt, angry, jealous that his book is going to sell nowhere near as well as his wife's book? Oh, yes, and here are people going on about how Trump apparently is forcibly sterilizing all of these people kept in cages. Yeah, sure he is. Oh, yes, Sarah Fryer. Facebook has been careful to keep Trump and conservatives happy. How is it that a bolt of lightning doesn't come down from heaven and strike her for saying this? Facebook has been careful to keep Trump and conservatives happy. Oh, okay. And there's a picture on Bloomberg Business Week of Mark Zuckerberg wearing a MAGA hat because Trump is Facebook is all about pleasing conservatives. This is the direct opposite of the truth, but that seems to be the role of the media now, to present stories which are obviously untrue, and then demand that everyone get on board, because to do otherwise would be misinformation, possibly hate speech. Let's see. Here is a tweet by Ruby Kramer, who is a BuzzFeed political reporter and human. Yes, that's what it says. She actually says that she's human. Well, I didn't doubt it, but it's glad to be reminded. Colin and Urouge are children of immigrants. beloved by friends, lawyers, working to balance the justice system. Now they face 45 plus years for allegedly setting fire to an empty cop car. One story from the Trump crackdown on BLM protesters from Albert, Samaha, and me. It's so sad. It's so sad. The NYPD van on a Brooklyn street was banged up and empty, a battered steel shell with shattered windows and a mask of spray paint. Shortly before 1 a.m. on Saturday, May the 30th, the fourth straight night of nationwide protests against police brutality, a Molotov cocktail set it ablaze. Oh, nationwide protests, not nationwide riots. A surveillance camera perched outside the NYPD's 88th precinct down the block captured the incident, including a tan town and country minivan at the scene. Around 10 minutes later, officers pulled over a vehicle fitting that description. Colin Ford Mattis, 32, was at the wheel, and Uruj Rahman, 31, was in the passenger seat. Officers found a lighter, a tank of gasoline, and a bottle stuffed with toilet paper in the back seat. Rahman and Mattis were handcuffed and transported into holding cells at NYPD headquarters. 2 of 23 people arrested in Brooklyn that night for actions connected to the protests against police brutality. Connected to. The case against Rahman and Mattis, however, took a different track because the incident involved an explosive device. A specialized unit of NYPD officers and FBI agents called the Joint Terrorism Task Force spearheaded the investigation. Within hours of the arrest, before Brooklyn prosecutors had even begun writing up charges or simply letting them go, FBI agent Kyle Johnson submitted a criminal complaint in federal court, and federal prosecutors informed local authorities that the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York was taking over the case. Oh dear. President Donald Trump has issued an executive order stating the Department of Justice would prosecute to the fullest extent permitted anyone who vandalizes public monuments, claiming this was necessary because of local public officials' abdication of their law enforcement responsibilities. So let's get into the, well-respected lawyers who met at a birthday party in 2014. Rahman and Mattis are both in their early 30s with large social circles and close-knit families, living the American dream. Their immigrant parents had aspired for them. Did their parents really aspire for them to be tossing Molotov cocktails? Really? Rahman defended tenants facing evictions, and Mattis did pro bono work representing women with low incomes in family court while practicing corporate law at a prestigious firm. They had become attorneys in hopes of using the law to help balance the scales of a justice system that, in their eyes, favored rich over poor, white over black, citizen over refugee. Exactly the sort of people that America needs more of. But is there any more sobbing? That they're the children of immigrants. Yes, that makes them extra special. That they have immigrants who presumably came over to the United States simply to escape their shithole countries or to get richer. Oh, yes. Rahman's family arrived from Pakistan in 1993 when she was 4 and moved to the Bay Ridge, a southwest Brooklyn neighborhood that drew immigrants from Italy and Ireland, then Russia and Poland, then China, and more recently, the Middle East. Yeah, you see, I'm really tired of this. People from Pakistan, they're no different from the Irish, the Italians, Russians, or the Poles. No difference at all. An immigrant is an immigrant. As in many neighborhoods that were nearly all white, the influx of non-European immigrants brought a backlash. Ooh, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. I think the great American songwriter, Woody Guthrie, I think that he said it best. And I'm going to quote a couple of lines from his song Plane Wreck at Los Gatos. You won't have names when you ride the big airplane. All they will call you will be deportees. I had no idea that old Woody Guthrie was so based. But life is full of surprises, as I like to say. In political news, Pink News, which is appearing, for the 4th time on this live stream this week, is very upset with something. Queer men to forego their morals this November, with a thumping 45% vowing to back Donald Trump. As much as a widening gulf has yawned between alphabet people voters and US President Donald Trump over the years, apparently launching an array of anti-queer policies and overall not caring about queer people is enough to get them to vote for you. Again, okay, so queer was a word that we weren't supposed to say because it was an insult. Now, supposedly, it has been reclaimed by people, and it has never been satisfactorily explained to me how queer is different from gay, except I get the impression it simply means louder and nastier. But no, we're not allowed to use it as an insult, even though, or just use it as a synonym for homosexuals. A survey around 1,200 queer male Americans found that about 45% plan to vote for Trump. Oh no, that's in the actual story. As much as Democratic presidential candidate has netted an albeit slim majority of the queer male vote, securing 51%, it signaled to pollsters how the president's brand of bullish showmanship has roiled the political landscape. Queer men have always voted reliably Democratic until now. Indeed, the alphabet people voting bloc shows that overall among its users, around 66% prefer Biden, while 34% support Trump. But for queer Americans, pollsters said, the statistics were tighter together. Oh, okay, so I'm getting from this that lesbians and transsexuals really don't like Trump. Well, yeah, never would have guessed that. Oh, and let's see what the anti-pope has to say. Again, from Pink News, Pope Francis urges parents to love their alphabet people children as they are because they are children of God. This is outright heresy, and I'm just looking back to those glorious days when Roman criminals were tossed in the Tiber as their final rest. Let's talk about Steely Dan. Steely Dan has been trending. And I thought when I saw them trending, I did what most people did, and I thought that perhaps Donald Fagen had died. But luckily, that is not the case. Steely Dan is trending because someone called Jerry Saltz tweeted, "The worst band ever is Steely Dan." And then almost only men love Steely Dan. Steely Dan was a band founded by Walter Becker and Donald Fagen, the late Walter Becker and Donald Fagen, in 1972. And the first go-round ended in 1981. They got back together decades later, a surprise comeback, which was very successful. Now, I want to say something about women and music. Some years ago, a popular Edmonton Journal columnist called David Staples wrote a column in which he stated an obvious truth, that women are not record collectors. Oh my word, the hysteria. And he was forced to pen a groveling apology. Oh yes, many, many female record collectors out there. Now, he knows that's not true, but I guess he wanted to keep his job. Now, I don't know. Remember record stores? I do. I've spent hundreds, possibly thousands of hours in record stores, going there to buy certain things, to weigh up whether I wanted this, that, or the other, or often just to browse in the bins of first LPs and then CDs. And I never saw any women doing it. Never saw any women doing it. I saw women in record stores. They would typically go in, and they would go over to the section where there are the best-selling records, and they would pick one of those. They had their mind made up that, they wanted this and only this, and that's what it was going to be. Now, of course, there are exceptions to this, but in my experience, women, they don't care about music in the way that men do. I remember I had this girlfriend years ago who she was attracted to me because, I don't know, I was a better class of man intellectually than she had previously associated with, or so she thought. And, he likes classical music. Later, when she discovered that I actually liked classical music and liked to sit alone in a room listening to it, she felt as if she'd been cheated because this was just a pose. People say they listen to classical music, but I mean, people don't really listen to it, right? Later on, I had this girlfriend who claimed to love classical music, particularly Chopin. And she bought the Deutsche Grammophon, like the complete works of Chopin. I never saw her listening to Chopin or any other classical music. Now, I suspect that, oh, Chopin, oh yes, what a romantic, tragic life. Now, women are often attracted to bands, singers, whatever, because of their looks. I mean, that's the way that women are. Steely Dan, not a good-looking band, except for, what do they call him? Bronzed rock god Jim Hodder, the original drummer, but he was in the back and obscured by his drums. If you've ever seen the clip of Steely Dan playing on, what was it, the Midnight Special, old late-night music show, what a scraggly-looking bunch of men they were. David Palmer was still with the band at the time, and I don't know what he actually looked like, but he had this very long curly hair obscuring his face. Oh, let's talk about this fellow Jerry Saltz. I just can't. There's a picture of him at the 2018 Pulitzer Prizes, and he was 67 years old, and he is doing the Soylent Grin, the new male grimace. Apparently, he's a big deal. He has been the senior art critic and columnist for New York Magazine, formerly the senior art critic for the Village Voice. He received the Pulitzer Prize for criticism in 2018 after being nominated in 2001 and 2006. He has also contributed to Art in America, Flash Art International, Frieze, and Modern Painters. He served as visiting critic at the School of Visual Arts, Columbia University, Yale University, and the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and was the sole advisor for the 1995 Whitney Biennial. He's the recipient of 3 honorary degrees, including from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and Kansas City Art Institute. Yes, he's a nitwit. He's an absolute nitwit. Here's a quote. All great contemporary artists, schooled or not, are essentially self-taught and are de-skilling like crazy. I don't look for skill in art. Skill has nothing to do with technical proficiency. I'm interested in people who rethink skill, who redefine or reimagine it. An engineer, say, who builds rockets from rocks. Yeah, that's not going to work. That is not going to work. His humor, irreverence, and self-deprecation and volubility have led some to call him the Rodney Dangerfield of the art world. Well, actually, Rodney Dangerfield was funny. Okay, so yeah, he hates Steely Dan. Well, let's say, Steely Dan, they've been called yacht rock. I don't really think that they are yacht rock. For instance, I don't know, a song like Bodhisattva or My Gold Teeth, either of the versions, or that arpeggiated chord that opens Don't Take Me Alive. They don't really strike me as being yacht rock. But I think that it's the lyrics that put off women. And their first hit from their first album, Can't Buy a Thrill, was called Do It Again. In the morning, you go gunning for the man who stole your water, and you fire till he is done in, but they catch you at the border. And the mourners are all singing as they drag you by your feet, but the hangman isn't hanging, and they put you on the street. Yikes. It's not the typical sentiments that one finds in a popular song. Yeah, you go back, Jack, do it again. Wheel turning round and round. You go back, Jack, do it again. When you know she's no high climber, then you find your only friend in a room with your two-timer, and you're sure you're near the end. Then you love a little wild one, and she brings you only sorrow. All the time you know she's smiling, you'll be on your knees tomorrow. Now you swear and kick and beg us that you're not a gambling man. Then you find you're back in Vegas with a handle in your hand. Your black cards can make you money, so you hide them when you're able. In the land of milk and honey, you must put them on the table. Women, they don't like sentiments like that as a rule. And that, and the fact that, I don't know, that Steely Dan, not good looking band, I think that's enough to cement a female dislike of Steely Dan. Let's see, here is a piece, somewhat related, from the New York Times from June. I'm not a dad, but I rock like one. A millennial woman had a realization last summer, decades after enduring her father's music on car rides as a child. She entered a Steely Dan phase. The beginning is too banal to recall vividly, writes Lindsay Zolads. A familiar melody stuck in my head one morning last summer, leading to a streaming service search, then a long afternoon lost listening to the entire record and its ambitious follow-up. From there, things snowballed. By the end of the week, I had to accept it. I was going through a Steely Dan phase. Like a lot of people, many of my earliest musical memories involve being a captive backseat listener in my parents' car during long road trips. It was there on the upholstered bench seat of a Ford Taurus that I first declared the blandest, dullest, most excruciatingly monotonous music I'd ever heard in my nearly decade-long life was Steely Dan. As a kid, the noodly, pristine sounds of Walter Becker and Donald Fagen signified nothing so much as my dad exerting oppressive control over the car's stereo, just infinite shades of sonic gray and songs that would never freaking end. Do it again? What else have you been doing for the last 5.5 minutes for this song? Actually, especially compared with, say, progressive rock, Steely Dan's songs were usually pretty economical in terms of length. And then all of a sudden I was 32 and listening to Pretzel Logic intently in my best headphones, declaring myself an honorary resident of Barrytown. Isn't this song against the people who live in Barrytown? What had happened to me? Like anyone seeking rational advice, I looked to Twitter. Some personal news I posted last August announcing my new infatuation. I was dumbfounded by the response, nearly 1,000 likes and a lively discussion among friends and followers, reassuring me that I was not alone. We'll all meet you for dinner at Denny's at 4:30, my friend Rob wrote, which I assumed was a reference to an obscure Steely Dan lyric I didn't yet recognize, but I now see was just his way of saying that we are both old. I'm at once honored and chilled to my bones to tell you that from the beyond, the Walter Becker estate replied, "We've been expecting you." As I sighed and once again dropped the needle on my parents' old copy of Gaucho, I started to see that my Steely Dan phase was not an aberration, but inevitable, if long resisted, final frontier of my musical tastes. One of my beloved car requests was Billy Joel's Stormfront. Ooh, Billy Joel. As an annoyingly precocious and not even remotely popular preteen, I got very into Wilco, circa its double 1996 album Being There. I'm still not over the death of Tom Petty and cannot imagine a time when the opening chords of Free Fallin', played unassumingly over drugstore speakers, will not bring me to public tears. If anything, my recent embrace of Steely Dan has helped me settle into a newfound level of self-acceptance. I'm a discerning, feminist-minded millennial woman, and I also love dad rock. Yes, dad rock. Coined by music critic Rob Mitchum in 2007 to his later regret. He used it in an unfavorable Pitchfork review of Wilco's Sky, Blue Sky, an album of unapologetic straightforwardness. He wrote that nakedly exposes the dad rock gene Wilco has always carried but courageously attempted to disguise. The term stuck not just to Wilco, but to the more canonical and constitutionally laid-back classic rock influences. Several years later, in the introduction to a list of 20 dad rock albums you should learn to love, one of them being The Dark Side of the Moon. That's very curious a choice, because The Dark Side of the Moon was immensely popular when it came out in 1973, and remains immensely popular. It sells something like a million copies every year. I don't know what the Green Onions by Booker T and the MG is on this list from Flavor Wire. Is this just means that music that is not current? Is that what it means? Yeah, Peter Gabriel. So, all right. Dire Straits, Paul Simon, Graceland, Frank Zappa. Have I offended someone? That's dad rock, really? I thought that I was going to say something nasty about Frank Zappa, but I'm not going to. I can't stand his music. Great Nick's Nationalist said Steely Dan would have had a harder time making it in the heyday of MTV. Donald Fagen, when his first solo album came out, there was a very beautiful, rather moving video to the song New Frontier. It was filmed in a bomb shelter, the height of the Cold War. I love that video. Okay. Getty Lee, no male model, says Manfred von Thistlebaum. Dan Allison, yes, they did little in the way of videos. Their thing was lyrics. Fagan and Becker were English majors, not music majors. Of course, Walter Becker learned to play guitar from Jimi Hendrix. Or sorry, was it Jimi Hendrix, Randy California? Cool. Me and KMG share Billy Joel contempt. LOL, says Buddy. I read this biography of Billy Joel that came out a couple of years ago. I was just fascinated by the Billy Joel cult. I mean, has there ever been anyone more calculated in the history of popular music? This, new wave, blah, blah. It's all rock and roll to me. Sure, it is Billy Joel. Of course, he played in this band called Attila, which was an organ drum combo, much like Lee Michaels. And it has one of the most hideous and hilarious music covers of all time. One of the things I found strange about Billy Joel is just his difficulties with girls. I mean, he was in a rock band that was signed, and he couldn't get girls. And he ended up, with someone else's wife, whose brother then stole all his money. And just repeatedly, it's like Billy Joel just coming a cropper with women. And I'm thinking, there's something off about that. I have to admire Billy Joel for his fortitude in actually coming back from, having everything stolen from him. What's your opinion on Fleetwood Mac, says Yo Mama? Peter Green, Danny Kerwin, Fleetwood Mac, yes. The later version, no. It's, boy, that's dad rock. It's also smug. You make lovin' fun. Ugh. I didn't hear Whitesnake on that list. Don't they know greatness when they hear it, says William Hicks. James Andrews says, I love the way the lyrical structure matches the chord changes exactly in Steely Dan songs, makes them sound weird. Yes, someone on Twitter was saying, Steely Dan, yeah. They're not the Eagles, though. There's a very funny yacht rock episode about the rivalry between Steely Dan and the Eagles, or supposed rivalry, where the Eagles are just these redneck idiots constantly looking to beat people up. And they're scorning Becker and Fagan as nerds. And Donald Fagan, throughout the episode, he speaks in this like hipster lingo so thick that he needs a translator. Very, very funny. But no, the Eagles, talk about calculating. My view of the Eagles is the same as the dudes in The Big Lebowski. Jefferson Starship. We built this city on rock and roll. It's amazing the things that you do when you've got used to having a lot of money, and then you're going to have to record this song, We Built This City on Rock and Roll. Well, I guess if that's what it takes to stay rich, we'll do it. What do the guys from Boston look like? I just know the guitarist, what was his name? Tom Schultz, very tall, exceedingly tall fellow. Their first vocalist was this little chubby French-Canadian fellow. It wasn't really a band. I still think the story behind Rumors deserves some kind of televised miniseries, especially the bit about Stevie Nicks aborting her child in order to spite Don Henley and then writing a song about it. That is just heartwarming. Don't you think? I do not like Bruce Springsteen, Chogokin 666. I did not like Bruce Springsteen from the beginning. And when he, 1975, he was on the cover of Time and Newsweek the same week, I thought, well, the fix is in. And that record cover, Darkness at the Edge of Town, that is one of the inadvertently funniest covers I've ever seen. I don't know what it's trying to express, but the positioning of him in the picture and the expression on his face looked like, he'd been woken up by the cops at 3 o'clock in the morning and they were asking him about a car and him saying, no, that's not my car. That's what it looks like. Love songs are abominations, says Judas Fly Shy. I don't know. Peter Blagvad, one of my favorites, said that when he was signed to Virgin, they demanded, a love song on one of his records. So he wrote one, and he said, he's thinking the whole time, that's kid stuff. Jim Smith said many of the original Airplane personnel had left by the time of Starship. No, yeah, that's true. Boston was a one-man band. Yes, yeah, that's right. Okay. I'd rather go to an Alice Cooper or Grand Funk Railroad concert than a Billy Joel concert, says Tweety Bird. I'm going to move on to Theater Thursday here. A little different this week. I'm going to be talking about the work of a single man, an American animator called Tex Avery, who is, my favorite animator. He was born Frederick Avery, 1908. Tex, he was called Tex. Guess what? Because he was from Texas. And he died in 1980. And Tex Avery, when I was growing up, there were cartoons in the morning and cartoons in the afternoon. And they were mostly old Warner Brothers and MGM cartoons. But you'd also get others. I don't know, Heckle and Jekyll and Woody Woodpecker and the like. But it was Tex Avery who formed in my young mind the idea of what cartoons can be. That is to say, anything goes. You can do anything in a cartoon. So why not do it? Tex Avery, he didn't invent Bugs Bunny when he was working for Warner Brothers, but he formulated the head of Bugs Bunny as we know him today. He did invent Daffy Duck, I suppose, who is my favorite Warner Brothers cartoon character, mostly because of my resemblance to him. I mean, not physical, but let's say emotional. I've always wanted to be, droll like Bugs Bunny, but no, wasn't up to it. Of course, and Tex Avery was also instrumental in the change of Porky Pig and Elmer Fudd into the forms that we know now. I learned an enormous amount about American culture from watching cartoons. And I recall what in the late 1960s, cartooning had changed, at least the cartoons that you saw on television had changed. Hanna-Barbera, obviously those cartoons are made for children like Scooby-Doo. With Hanna-Barbera and Scooby-Doo, I thought, this isn't funny. It's just stupid. And I suppose it was sometime later before I realized, or it was pointed out to me, or I read it somewhere, that these cartoons of Tex Avery and the like, they weren't made for children. They were made for adults, which makes all of the difference. Of course, by the time that I was growing up, the tradition of showing cartoon features in cartoon shorts in theaters was gone. None of the extras they used to get, no newsreels or anything like that, just the previews and the movie. There were still double features when I was growing up, but they didn't last for much longer either. So Tex Avery, went to Los Angeles from Texas and started working first at the Walter Lantz studio, which is associated with Woody Woodpecker, Chilly Willy, and Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. And he lost an eye at the Lantz studio. Practical joke, flicking things back and forth. He took a tack to the eye, and then it was gone. And Tex Avery's career turned around completely when he started working for Leon Schlesinger. Leon Schlesinger was a businessman. He was not a cartoonist, and he had no sense of humor. He wanted to make money, and his cartoons made money. And so long as they made money, he let his animators pretty much do whatever they wanted. Their working conditions were pretty miserable. They worked in not much more than a shack, which they called Termite Terrace because it was full of termites, and they were not paid very much money at all. But they had fun working. And I suppose at that time, that was more important to them than money. And Tex Avery was given supervisory role at with Leon Schlesinger. This company was later acquired by Warner Brothers. And it was Tex Avery that pretty much defined what a Warner Brothers cartoon would be. That is to say, wild, wacky, mayhem, anything goes, as opposed to the very sentimental style of Walt Disney. You know, I knew right from the very beginning that, I suppose what my taste was in this sort of thing, or what my taste was generally, because I didn't really much like Walt Disney cartoons. I didn't like the sentimentality, particularly with regard to animals. Also, the lack of, gags. Tex Avery was one for gags. As he worked at Warner Brothers and later MGM, he worked on getting as many gags in his cartoons as possible, and is very modern in that respect. Now, Tex Avery ended up being fired by Leon Schlesinger because of the last Bugs Bunny cartoon that he directed called The Heckling Hare. Now, The Heckling Hare, Tex Avery, he founded a gag which was later reused in Pee-wee's Big Adventure and in Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. And the gag is a man or two men or a man and an animal fall off a cliff. And they fall and they're screaming. They're screaming in terror, and they fall and fall and fall and fall, and they don't hit the ground. And then they stop screaming, and then they realize that they're plummeting to their deaths, and they start screaming in terror again. If you've seen Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, one of them says, "Dude, this is a totally deep hole." Well, that was a Tex Avery gag. Schlesinger truncated the cartoon. Avery had them falling off the cliff gag 3 times. Schlesinger thought that was excessive. And the story goes that the end of the cartoon, Bugs Bunny was supposed to turn to the audience and say, "Hold on to your hats, folks. Here we go again." And apparently, oh my God, this was smut. Now, I've looked it up, and okay, it's a mildly smutty joke. But the idea that everyone in America would know this joke, it strikes me as very strange. Tex Avery, as previously said, went on to MGM, which he left after several years. And again, he wanted more money. He wanted more money, and he wouldn't get it. He didn't get it. And so he did later work, but it was commercial work, raid commercials of the 60s, and of course, the much-loved Frito Bandito. Hate speech. So, let's see. Let's talk about, I suppose, the first great Tex Avery cartoon from 1936. I Love to Singa. You've all seen it, right? Cartman was possessed by this cartoon on that show that Cartman is on, South Park. I Love to Singa, about the Moona and the Juna and the Springa. Yes, it's a very charming cartoon about an owl and his wife, and it's ethnic humor, German ethnic humor. That he's German, so he is one, very strict, and two, loves classical music. And so Mother Owl has laid a bunch of eggs, and we see them pop out of the shell, and they are all revealed to be musical geniuses or prodigies of some sort. And except for our hero, who he loves jazz, and Owl Jolson, they call him. Get it? And it's very funny that the father is absolutely irate at this young rascal and his jazz music, and he's going to teach him. And there are several scenes, very amusing, where he's singing along off tune to a harmonium. Drink to me only with thine eyes. And as soon as his mother isn't looking, he starts singing his jazz song, and his father won't have it. So he runs away from home, and his mother is in hysterics, and his father realizes that he has been too hard. And so Al Jolson, how is he going to make a living? Well, there is a talent contest, and he enters the talent contest. And as an example of gags, a typical Tex Avery gag, that the losing contestants in the contest are subject to physical chastisement in a very amusing way. I see that I Love to Singa is a Arlern and Harburg song, and it was sung indeed by Al Jolson in The Singing Kid, as well as Cab Calloway. So Porky's Duck Hunt. This is from 1937 in black and white, and it is the first appearance of Daffy Duck. And of course, we all know who Daffy Duck is and how Daffy Duck acts. But Daffy was something of a revelation to movie audiences, because he was the craziest character that had ever appeared. And later, of course, Daffy becomes not only crazy, but as his character deepens, you see the pathos that continually afflicts him, that he just doesn't have a charmed life like Bugs Bunny. And of course, he resorts often to attempt to get Bugs killed, shot to death by Elmer Fudd. Several of Tex Avery's cartoons are part of the Censored 11, which is a bunch of Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies cartoons, which are now verboten because of, wait for it, racism. I watched these cartoons as a child, and I never really understood the furor about them later, except, of course, busybodies who don't like people having fun. But, showing black cannibals in Africa, I certainly made no connection whatsoever to blacks in the United States. And supposedly, these cartoons showing black people at their leisure is supposed to be insulting. I always thought, wow, these Negroes sure know how to have a good time. I've seen you can find poor quality copies of the Censored 11 on video channels like YouTube. I've seen the Isle of Pingo Pongo, and I found it amusing, you know, but I don't know. There were rumors. There have been rumors in recent years that that Warner Brothers has restored these cartoons, and that they're planning to release them, you know, along with the usual disclaimers and hiring some prominent black person, you know, to say these things are awful, but, you know, we shouldn't erase the past. We need to understand it so, you know, we can grow, you know. But I should also mention that a great number of Tex Avery cartoons, both Warner Brothers and MGM, are available on the Warner Brothers Platinum series, this Blu-ray. They are not restored, but the materials that they're working from are quite good. And so, you know, that's a definite buy. Yes, tortoise beats hare. This is a very amusing cartoon as well. Tex Avery loved to take fables, myths, and confound them, or deconstruct them, as we say now. And tortoise beats hare is one of the funniest of that example. So when Tex Avery moved to MGM, you notice that his cartoons become much faster. Blitz Wolf was his first cartoon for MGM, and it's not shown anymore because it's got Hitler in it. And I don't know, it didn't seem odd to me at the time, but there's a whole bunch of cartoons from Warner Brothers, MGM, even Disney, making fun of Hitler. And apparently it's not allowed anymore to make fun of Hitler, even though he was obviously a very easy person to make fun of. But no, we're not supposed to do that anymore. Red Hot Riding Hood is a Tex Avery cartoon which introduced a lot of tropes, as they say. Being excited, particularly in a sexual manner. The eyes literally coming out from the skull, or steam coming out of the ears, or a face turning so red with passion that it's boiling, or people, you know, looking at a woman, their body stretching. Tex Avery invented all of these. And of course, a lot of Tex Avery's cartoons are very meta, in the sense that he knows that there's, you know, the characters know that there is an audience watching, and involve the audience. That at the beginning of Red Hot Riding Hood, we're having a bland, very Disney-like retelling of the story of Little Red Riding Hood, and the characters revolt, saying they're fed up with this. They want something new. They want something modern. And this is what they get. And let's say Tex Avery loved good-looking women, and Red is a very good-looking woman indeed. In fact, the conceit of the Red cartoons, the Wolf cartoons, is that Red is so attractive that she drives every man crazy. And of course, we have a subversion of typical sexual roles, because Grandma is she's man hungry, or wolf hungry, and the poor wolf, of course, is being rejected by Red and is being pursued by Grandma, to his horror and terror. And at MGM, we also see Droopy. And Droopy was a cartoon character. He was a mournful dog who he rather commented sarcastically on things, the strange, wild things which were going on around him. And you can get on Blu-ray a pretty much a complete collection of the Droopy cartoons. They were many other animators were involved, and in fact, Droopy has been revived. But what is the great appeal of Tex Avery? It's, you watch his cartoons and you realize that you don't know what is going to come next. You really don't know what is going to come next. And of course, Tex Avery, he loved puns, and there are just so many of them, visual puns, which is hard to do. He liked characters holding up signs. For instance, a dog, a pointer, pointing in a very stylized, rigid manner, and a sign being held up. It ain't polite to point. Let's see. Let's look at some of his other cartoons. Oh yes, All This and Rabbit Stew is another one of these censored 11. I suppose Tex Avery seems to be the leader in this. Again, Africa, or they used to call it in the cartoons, Darkest Africa, is a place that few Americans knew anything about. And it was a rather fantastical place. And accordingly, the depiction of Africa is in these cartoons is rather fantastical. But of course, it's not real. It's not real. And again, these cartoons, so many of them are lost. Although I must commend the Disney company, that they hired Whoopi Goldberg when they brought out a collection of their early cartoons to, explain away, all of the horrible bits. And we were told in this Disney collection, Golden Classics, I think it's called, it came in a metal tin. It's no longer available because, of course, Disney puts things in the vault. So we were told that these were unexpurgated. And actually, there's a joke about the wolf, the same big bad wolf, and he's dressed as a Jewish peddler, speaking in a Yiddish inflected voice. You have to go to an Easter egg to find that. And I thought, who would possibly find this, distressing now? How long has it been? How many generations has it been since Jews were peddlers in America? But no, and for decades now, classic cartoons have been mutilated when shown on television because of violence. Yes, apparently, when you fall off a building, you don't survive. When you get crushed by a giant mallet, you don't survive. I think that people understand this, Yes, it's the Looney Tunes Platinum Collection Volume 2 that you will find these Tex Avery cartoons on Blu-ray. And, yes, King Size Canary. Tex Avery liked situations where characters became very, very large, very, very forbidding. And yes, in King Size Canary, a little bird eats a plant food, which promises great growth. And it becomes a very, very big, and you get a succession of animals becoming very, very big as well, which was a gag, which was later repurposed in a Futurama episode where Bender becomes as big as a skyscraper, and later Dr. Zoidberg becomes as big as a skyscraper in order to defeat him. I don't think that there's anything that I've seen in art that has made me laugh as hard as Tex Avery cartoons. And so that is a pretty solid recommendation from me. Okay, what are we talking about? We're talking about Bob Crane? Oh dear. I like that movie Autofocus. It's a hard movie to watch. But it is very, very good. And Greg Kinnear is outstanding, as is Willem Dafoe. Yo Mama says Dark Africa, Darker Africa, Darkest Africa. Yes. Okay. Sure seems like a good time to watch Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Eh, Kevin? Yes, you're absolutely right, but I wanted to leave a little gap. After I'd scheduled Tex Avery, I wanted there to be a gap before I talked about a cartoon again. So don't worry. It's coming up. William Hicks says, Deputy Droopy, where the thieves have to keep running to the hills to scream out in pain, was one that my brother and I used to howl over when we were kids. Yes. Manfred van Thistlebaum says, will he eventually cancel Jerry Lewis for his constant imitation of Asians? I get the impression that a lot of people were very embarrassed by Jerry Lewis for a long time before he died, even not counting that movie about the Holocaust that he made. Was it called The Day the Clown Cried? I read somewhere that Harry Shearer had seen it, and he said it was just as bizarre as you might expect. Jonathan Pohl says, I lived in darkest Africa for over 5 years. In these cartoons, when they talk about darkest Africa, if you had to put a label on it, it would be the Congo. I know the Congo has an outlet to the ocean, but equatorial Africa, right in the middle. Buddy does not like autofocus. Well, I would give it 4 stars rather than 2. As I say, it is. Yes, yeah. I'll repurpose an old joke of mine. The ultimate date movie. Max Vitriol says Steely Dan reminds me of bluegrass, sad music that sounds happy. Again, as to why women wouldn't like Steely Dan, I think that with quite a few of them, they're humming along to the song, and then they find out what the words are, and they think that it's a cruel trick that's been played on them. I had a friend of mine's wife years ago. There was a song by the Eagles, one of their last hits, and she loved that song, and she would sing "Party Tonight, Party Tonight." And I said to her, I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have done this. And I didn't mean anything cruel by it. It's just my nature. I said, the song is called Heartache Tonight, right? And I thought, I saw the fallen look on her face, and I thought, oh dear. Oh dear. Hogan's Heroes. Yeah, I'll just mention something about Hogan's Heroes. I used to watch Hogan's Heroes, and I never thought it was funny. When I was like 10 or 11 years old when it started, I never thought it was funny. And so the obvious question is, why did you watch it then? Well, putting my old man hat on, I say, in the first few decades of television, you didn't watch things because they were good. You watched them because they were on television. And I guess there's a lot of nostalgia for that era, because that show, Mr. Ed, the one about the talking horse, that is absolutely dire. And then some years ago, I found out that they've been released on DVD, and I'm thinking, why? And then I got it. It's like there's people in America, I suppose in Canada too, that like to put on this stupid sitcom about a talking horse because the world was very different in those days. Not in the sense that, there were talking horses in that world, but let's just say the tenor of the times was very different. Of course, have you ever seen the Sctv Godfather parody, which is absolutely brilliant? where the same character from The Godfather, what the movie producer, is the same actor who plays him. That he's got a talking horse, who he's named after a Rossini opera, and he loves this opera. This horse can sing opera, but he won't sing. He says, "You know the rules. I don't sing to strangers." It's too funny. Too funny. I've read, I don't know whether this is true or not, that one of Bob Crane's sons actually sells the sex videos, or he did at one time. I don't know. You could go to his website and you could order a Bob Crane sex tape. Wouldn't they have to like take out the eyes? Put barriers across the eyes of the women in this. Okay, Bob Crane's gay lover, and there's a funny bit in the movie where, as Larry David would say, autofocus party, that they film this and then they watch it, and and Bob Crane says, "Wait, whose hand is that on my ass? Is that your hand?" Yeah. And Bob Crane flips out, and Willem Dafoe says, well, it's a group grope. And Bob Crane isn't having any of it. Hogan's Heroes, it ran from, I think, 1966 to 1970, something like that. Oh, yes, and Brandon Smith has some quotations. Yeah, there's this great scene in Autofocus where Bob Crane was Catholic, and so it's arranged for him to talk to a priest. He's having trouble, so he talks to a priest, and it's in a diner, very modernistic diner, and the priest he's got the black shirt and the Roman collar, but he's got short sleeves, and the sun is just flooding through this huge window, and it's a visual tell. The idea that the moral austerities of Catholicism are going to be a tough sale in sunny Southern California. It's really rather brilliant, actually. Manfred von Thistlebaum says that Hogan's Heroes was based on Stalag 17, which was a pretty good movie. I don't know. It's a Billy Wilder film, and I love Billy Wilder, but it's not his script, really. It's not his idea. There's a whole bunch of humor in that film. This one guy constantly carrying on about Betty Grable and impressions, and I watched that, and I think people were easily amused in those days, apparently. I'm also disappointed with the ending, because throughout the whole movie, they know that there's a German informer in the camp, and okay, so there's a twist, and you think that that the men they'd be rather thoughtful about this, because it's a story of mistaken identity, or just mob prejudice. But the ending is quite flat. Okay, so on that note, I'm going to wrap up today's show, and I will mention that it's the book club tomorrow, and I will be discussing Willa Cather's novel of the Old West and of missionary life. Death Comes for the Archbishop. So I will be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern time. If you like the show or any part of it, I'd appreciate it if you click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not already done so. If you would like to contribute to this live stream, much appreciated, especially at this time of great personal uncertainty. My PayPal address is kevin_grace@hotmail.com. Once again, kevin_grace@hotmail.com. If you're Canadian, you can send me funds directly via interact@kevingrace@shaw.ca. And I will leave you with this benediction in these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse. I do dearly wish that you, my dear listeners and viewers, find some form of genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good Good night.